sir. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me on. This is a very cool setup. You got, I don't know if you put the Ganesh there for me, but that's very sweet.
Actually, the story behind that Ganesh is my grandfather passed away 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. He'd been sick for a little while.
Okay.
But he actually gave me that a few years ago, and I had it in one of my places in L.A.
Okay.
And when I was visiting for the funeral and everything, I saw it. It caught my eye, and I was like, you know what? I'd really like that to be in Dallas with me. So it kind of just exists here because he gave it to me.
Yeah. That's he's the remover of all obstacles, right? So.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's what Ganesh is. And then the mythology, behind it, like he has the head of an elephant because an elephant never forgets. Right? He's got a big belly because he's well fed, and you can see he's got a plate of food right there. So he's always well fed.
So for those of you that might be listening, I've got a little
Ganesh
statue sitting here.
Oh yeah.
And Raj is just explaining to us everything about it because I really don't know much about the Indian religions.
Yeah.
Except for whatever we all hear on TV and stuff.
Yeah, Temple of Doom.
Yeah. So this is way more interesting because I didn't know that there was so much significance.
Yeah, and then he's fearless because they say elephants are scared of mice.
Yes.
There's a mouse at his foot.
So it signifies being fearless.
Fearless, wealthy, prosperous, intelligent. He's Lord Shiva's son, Shiva the Destroyer.
Yes.
That's his son. How he got the elephant head is Shiva's wife, the goddess Parvati, was taking a shower, and he was put in charge to guard her door so that nobody came in. And she would go on these long pilgrimages, these long journeys, long sabbaticals. And he never knew what his father looked like, so up comes this guy and is like, get out of the way of the door. I'm here to see my wife. And he's like, my mom's taking a bath. You can't enter. And he's the destroyer. He's the guy. He's the man. And here's this kid telling him what to do.
Right.
And he got furious and cut his head off.
So that's why.
And then he walked in, and Parvati, the goddess Parvati, like, what'd you just do? That's your son. And so he went back out, and the first thing he saw was an elephant and cut and replaced the head.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a father atoning for a mistake?
Yeah.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like the more you know star should just fly by at some point, like the little star that goes, the more you know.
Yeah, exactly, right? The Reading Rainbow?
Reading Rainbow, yeah.
Yes, it was.
Because now everybody knows about Ganesh.
That's interesting. So what is so Ganesh is a man.
Yes.
What's in either hand? It seems like he's holding things.
So you have, so right there is a plate of food.
And granted, there's 4 hands that I see. So
yeah, so there's a plate of food there. There's an axe or like a smaller sword in this hand. I think there's a sword of the flower in this hand, and then there's the blessing is in that hand. So it's inscribed with the either it'll have an om or something inscribed where it says blessing to you.
Oh, interesting.
So it's power, beauty, grace.
And is
blessing.
he sitting in a blossom?
He's sitting in a lotus flower.
Lotus flower. Okay.
Yeah. And so it's blessings, it's power, it's wealth, it's knowledge, and it's courageousness. So that's why he removes all you put it, like if you look, like even in my car on the dash is a Ganesh. And a lot of Indians you'll see, like if you see a little thing on that looks like an elephant that's sitting on like on the dashboard.
Yes.
You can go, that's an Indian guy because it's the remover of all obstacles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then it's meant to keep you safe. And
keep you safe. And it was very interesting. I was really, really lucky when, living in LA, I got to open for Tim Allen.
Yeah.
a few
cool
times.
man.
Yeah, a few times. I got to feature for him.
Where at?
At the Laugh Factory on
Nice.
Sunset. So,
This is just this amazing, iconic place. If you've never been,
Yeah,
treat yourself
it's
to the Laugh Factory and
it's
the
my
Comedy Store.
That's the Laugh Factory is my home club. That was the one that's where I got my big break in LA. But I was working with Tim, and my keychain had a Ganesh, and he's like, "Oh my God, is that Ganesha?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "I don't know why, but since I was a kid, I've been drawing him, and he's got drawings everywhere of Ganesha." And so I think I'd gone to India to tour, and I came back and I brought him one. And
for those of you that don't know, Tim Allen is an American comedian
Yep.
with no Indian descent.
none at all.
None that
at all.
I can think of at all.
No. I think his name is Tim Dick, Timothy Dick. And I think maybe Irish. I don't know what that
Not
last
sure,
name
but
is.
definitely not Indian.
No, but he's been since he was a kid. He told me he's been drawing.
And he can't
Ganesh.
figure out where the genesis of that is, like popping into his head.
But it's always been like a favorite thing. He's got a couple of them over his fireplace or whatever, and that's at least what he told me. And so I brought him one of those and didn't really think anything of it. You know, he's an icon and this legendary comic, and he was nice enough to let me feature for him. So I'm like, as a gift, as a thank you.
Yeah.
And he took to Twitter and he's like, thank you so much for your gift, and he took a picture of it.
That's so sweet of him. I like those things because a lot of the comedians that are maybe an older generation, we don't have this kind of podcasts and a lot of interviews with them where you kind of get an inside look at how they really are as a person.
Yeah.
Because everybody talks about, like, you know, the douchebags in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of
them. A lot of comedians are exempt from that because they go through so much crap just to get there.
Yeah, I mean, you would think so. I mean, I've met my fair share. But I think there was this back in the day, there was this whole concept of aloofness, and you didn't know about your favorite star outside of what Teen Beat or whatever magazine at the time was reporting on it. Right.
Or if they did like a book memoir kind of thing.
Yeah, something like that. So seeing behind the curtain was never, and they were very standoffish and they kept their own little clique, and there was that mystery, and like if it wasn't for those things, like back in the day, like you didn't know what Humphrey Bogart did.
Yeah, like
during the day,
really
or you didn't know what
Red Fox was thinking.
Yeah, nobody had any clue of that stuff, and so I think once the onion started getting, peeled more and more as time goes on, people felt like I think they're trying to. I think why that arrogance and why that aloofness exists is they're trying to go back, like throw back to that mysteriousness, and that was back in the day. That whole iconic. We're the celebrities behind the wall. That's why if you go to LA and this, like all their houses, you can't see behind.
No, they're always gated communities, and there's always very large shrubbery that covers whatever the interior may be.
And that's the idea of it, is you can't see what we're doing back here.
So to that point, do you think that now that comedy has had this humongous shift into the internet era where podcasting and YouTube has become an outlet for us as the audience to become better acquainted with the comedian on stage, does that take away from comedy in any way?
I don't think so. I don't know how you would equate that to a writing process or a performance process. I don't know how.
I don't either. I'm just curious.
I don't.
If anything has changed in the dynamic.
I mean, I think the only thing that's changed is accessibility. That's it. You don't have to come to. That's the thing, right? Is I can have tens of thousands of followers and millions of views and all of these things, but you don't have to come to my show, right? You don't have to come. You can just sit in your house and watch me now. Whereas when I was starting out, like if you wanted to see me perform, if I wanted to see, the guys that I enjoyed, I had to go to a club, or I had to go to back in the day Blockbuster or whatever, and rent a video to watch them. There wasn't any of this sitting behind a computer and just watching to my heart's content. And then if they are in town, do I want to go or not? So it does reflect in ticket sales. It does reflect in bookings, because the more content you're putting out there, I think, and I could be wrong, there's two sides of it, right? The more content, the more people go, oh my God, I really like this guy. Next time he's in town, I'm going to go see him. Or, man, this is my favorite, and he puts content out all the time. I never have to leave my house. So it's dependent on who you are as a person. Like if you don't like to leave your house, the world's your oyster. And if you like to leave your house, the world's your oyster.
And I feel like if you're somewhere in between, you get the pleasure of the comedian putting out a special on YouTube for everybody to see, and the stuff on Instagram, and the podcast series that he or she probably does.
Yeah.
And then if you really do like that person and you've, taken in all of this content, then you go see him. Like that happened for me.
Yeah.
I wasn't as familiar with Ari Shafir's work. Until the whole Kobe controversy stuff happened. And then he cooled off, and then I saw him do some stuff and thought it was funny, edgy. Yeah. And then I saw his latest special, Jew, and he was coming to Addison Improv, and I was like, I have to go see this guy.
Yeah.
I had that kind of a
Now were you I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No.
were you more intrigued by the possibility of there being some sort of scandal if you saw him live? Was he going to be more edgy or more scandalous because he wasn't? Was that in the back of your head, or were you like, no, I just really like this content, I'm going to go see him?
Yeah, so I'm not that kind of a
Fan?
fan of anything where I'm always trying to find some sort of negativity or controversy or
No, I
bullshit.
think it's like the secret indulgence, right? Like, oh my God, if I see him live and there's no cameras here and we're behind closed doors and it's all fans, is he
So-
going to be edgier than what we see now that he's gotten? Because Ari's nickname or his moniker for the longest time was the Amazing Racist. That's what he went by, and and if you think about it, back then in those times, that gimmick or that kind of stick or whatever you want to call it, that's just him. That's who he was. And I think as time progressed, people went, "Oh, you can't do that."
I think
so,
I think Ari is part of the tail end of a generation of comedians that was kind of passing.
yeah,
And where it was much raunchier at one point.
sure,
In my opinion, where it was no holds barred.
yeah.
Now, was it correct? Was it insensitive? Was it? That's not for me to say.
It's not for anyone but the audience to decide.
And
That's the thing.
And in those times, the audience was laughing
Mm-hmm.
hysterically. I think we forget as a collective that society grows.
Absolutely.
Meaning the previous society that was okay with the content
Yeah.
isn't the current one, which means don't ostracize the comedian that was part of society previously.
Yeah, and I don't know, and I've been doing this 20 plus years now, and so I don't know. It's the audience seems less forgiving if you haven't caught up to them yet, and there are those people. I wouldn't put myself in that group, but there are comics that I see that I know that I'm like, they're just that they're trying. They're
Right.
catching up. It's just not as fast as the audience is now, but they're trying to get there, and it looks like it's like they're overcompensating, like they're trying to get that audience. I think they're just trying to catch up because it's like trying to get your grandpa to understand Justin Bieber.
Right.
Right? When Justin Bieber popped, when he was 15 or 14 or whatever it was, sitting your grandfather down and going, "You got to listen. This is great." He might eventually like a song or whatever. He might eventually catch up to what your speed is, but I don't think he's going to immediately go, "Man, I'm on board." You know what I mean? So I think that there's got to be a little bit of give and take between an audience and an artist
Yes.
to catch up. If that's the case, and if you don't, and that's the thing, there's so much content, there's so much out there now. If you don't like something, just change the channel.
It's been a fact since cable became a thing.
Since the television, since radio.
Yeah, you don't like
if
it,
you don't
change
like
the
it,
channel.
change the channel. And I think there's people going, "No, make me like something you say," and I'm like, "No, that's not how this works. Like, this is how my brain works."
Yeah, because I think we're in a time frame right now where self-censorship is directed in the wrong way.
I think I
Artists
haven't heard.
shouldn't be
I haven't heard.
censored.
It, yeah.
You should censor yourself if you don't like the content. Don't listen to it, but don't.
I haven't heard it put that well ever, and so thank you for that. But you're
appreciate it.
100% right.
I just feel like and it's in all facets of
In everything.
Like the media is that way, entertainment is that way,
Yeah.
the news sources are that way, and for some reason I don't like that. Well, I mean, I know the reason I don't like it because it takes the weight off of society's shoulders to
Yeah.
understand when they're wrong.
Right.
Because I think that's a lot of what entertainment and art does in general is like show us how stupid we can be as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand that there was a whole generation that went, "That Beethoven guy's garbage."
Yeah.
Like there was a, you know what I mean? Like there was a, when those guys were like, that you have to understand that's how society is. They're like, Monet, he's never gonna make it.
Dude, poor
Like,
Van Gogh died and then his painting sold. The
Yeah.
man sold nothing while alive.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that's what you have to understand. And I think people look back and go, "Man, well, he was so ahead of his time." Well, that might have been the problem as well. Is he was ahead of his time, and people couldn't catch up to whatever it is. The options are out there for you to find someone, especially now, to find someone you like that's in your wheelhouse. That you have to go, "You know what? I can just watch him," and then every outlet goes, "You like him? Here's who else you'll like."
Yeah.
And then they go, "Okay, well, here's all of this content. I never have to mess with anybody else."
But that's again another form of censorship, in my opinion, because expose everyone to other content too, even if they don't like it. They should be the one to say they don't like it.
But here's the problem with that then. And there's the flip side of the artistry of it, right? If they go, "We don't like this," the people that are in charge, because now it's no longer about the show. It's about asses and seats. That's what every booker will tell you. Every club will tell you. Every agent will tell you.
So does that mean your following is a direct correlation into what clubs you'll be able to work at?
100%.
Okay.
And so what happens is if they go, we don't like this, and this we, if that we is big enough, then it doesn't matter what your artistry is. It doesn't matter what your concept is or your point of view is. They can go, well, look at all of these people that don't want to see you. So I would. This is just me personally. This is Raj Sharma. Me personally, when it gives you all of those, and we've suggested these artists for you, just keep watching those, because if you guys collectively go, well, I didn't really like that joke. The joke that went viral for me is a joke about me playing football in high school.
Yeah, I heard that live the other day. It was so hilarious.
And it's a 100% true story. I was bullied horribly as a child. My parents from London, we came here, and we were in Mesquite, Texas.
By the way, I never got to my first and only question that I asked is, where were you born?
I was born in Stephenville, Texas.
Okay.
I was born in Stephenville. My mom was, this is before they knew to not tell pregnant women to fly in their late term. And so she was, I think, 6.5 months pregnant with me when she got here, went to work straight the same night. So I was born here. Mom. Yeah. I was born here. And then back then it was easier for her to go back, like for us to go back to London, than it was for all of the family in London to come see us.
So family lived in London.
Family lived in London. Family lived in India. A tremendous amount of family lived in India. Her friends and things like that were back in London. That's where she spent 17 years after India. So it'd be easier it'd be financially better. And it'd be easier for my mom to go, okay, this was back in 1975. When you go, okay, well, we're going to come to London for 6 months or a year. And everybody gets to meet the baby and blah, blah, blah. And then we'll go to India. And so we're in India for, I don't remember how long it was, but I have bits and pieces that I remember of it. London, I have bits and pieces of as well. And then we went back when I was 16. And we would go to India like almost every 4 years or so. But London we went back to a couple times to visit her friends that she considered her family back then. And so,
what part of London did you do you remember those bits and pieces?
Yeah. Like so my before they got married, my mother lived in Golders Green. My dad lived where all the Punjabis live, is in South Hall. And then when they got married, their first house was in Ealing and then Harrow, and then they moved to Central London. Okay. So they lived on the very famous Baker Street. So
there you go.
Central London. So
anybody that's a Sherlock Holmes fan, Baker Street.
Yeah, and then we went back to India because my grandparents on both sides were there. My aunts and uncles were there, so we went there for, I think it was about a year. But we went there, and then we started going back to India constantly. Every 4 years, almost every 4 years, like clockwork. We'd go and spend the whole summer.
What part of India were you
New Delhi.
Because that's a huge country.
Yeah, New Delhi, the capital city. So, nice. So we'd go there. My mom was from a small... now a very big city, but a very small city back then, about 4 hours away from Delhi.
May I ask why the name change to New Delhi?
So there's Old Delhi,
yes,
and then there's New Delhi. So I think they were building the capital. This was new regime, right? This was independence, so they didn't want to lump. I believe this is I could be wrong, but I believe the idea was that Old Delhi is here, and then we're building New Delhi, where the capital is, and the presidential houses and all of that stuff is and Parliament, all of that is there. Okay. So let's make that its own distinction.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, so we lived in Mesquite. I mean, we went from Stephenville, and then
what's Stephenville? I'm not familiar.
So
with all of Texas.
So Stephenville is about an hour and a half east of Fort Worth.
Hour and a half east of Fort Worth.
Yeah. Okay. No, sorry. I'm sorry. West of Fort Worth. I apologize. West of Fort Worth. And it's Tarleton State University is there. There's the Dinosaur Park, very famous in Texas, Dinosaur Park. Like if you go, it's very cool. Like you can go into the rock beds and the river beds, and you can see like
the handprints, the footprints,
the footprints, and all the fossils. And they have a whole park dedicated to it. But it's just it's a nice small country town. We lived. My mom lived with a family called the Morrows. Lived there, and that's they had a ranch, and Mr. Morrow sold insurance in Fort Worth, and he drove to Fort Worth every day to do his insurance job, and came home. And there's a great picture of me. I wish I still had it. I don't know where it is, but it's me. I think I'm like 3 or 4.
Okay.
And I'm in full blown like Wranglers, boots,
Cowboy
pearl snap, and a Stetson. And apparently that wasn't dress up day. That was just what it was.
That was normal attire for.
And then we went to Mesquite in '81. Yeah, '81.
And you're how old at this point?
6.
Okay.
So 6 and 6 or 7, somewhere in there. But then only Indian family in Mesquite, Texas at the time. And so Mesquite at that time, probably about 80,000 or so people, but it's divided by highways. So there's 30, 635, 80. So every part of it. So there's Old Mesquite and New Mesquite and North Mesquite and West Mesquite. Like there's all of that.
Okay.
So I was on the New Mesquite side. So it felt like that was all of Mesquite. Even though there was all of this other stuff, we just didn't go there because we didn't have to.
And you're kind of cut off because of the highways.
Because of the highways and then localities. Well, that's North Mesquite and that's West Mesquite and then that's proper and that's Old. Whatever it was, we just kind of had, and everything was kind of popping up on that side of town. So we had our grocery stores and our malls and all that. So it was a city, but it had a very small town feel to it. And with that came, any change was weird. And here comes this new Hindu Brahmin family that celebrates, that has prayers on full moons and doesn't eat chicken fried steak and gravy. They have chicken curry and white rice,
which is pretty damn good.
It's amazing.
Now, sorry to cut you off, but quick question: full moon prayer?
Yeah, so every full moon we do a prayer. There's a whole. It's called Purnamashi. Purnamashi Puja. It's a prayer that we do every full moon to. I don't know the background of it. I'm just assuming it was to celebrate the new cycle. Okay. So there's a big prayer that's done, and I still remember like we'd be in our traditional attire, and we always put a with vermilion, red vermilion, a little dot here, and that's to represent your third eye, and the doorbell would ring, and we're doing like this prayer like 5:30 in the afternoon after school, and like I'm in full gear with the red dot. And my buddies want to go play football outside, and I open the door. I'm like, "Hey guys, I can't come out right now because we're praying to the moon." Right. And they're like, "All right, man, we're just not gonna. Just tell us when the full moon is. We won't bug you because this looks really weird."
Yeah,
So I was bullied really bad, and that's where the comedy stuff came from. I didn't know. I was really, really small. I was a really small kid. Like I weighed 65 pounds in the 6th grade.
Okay, yeah.
I was a year, dude. Yeah, and I was a year behind I was a year younger than everybody. So I was walking at 7 months old. I was reading and writing by 3.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
So you were on an accelerated path.
Yeah. And so they didn't know what to do with me. So they're like, "Well, here's kindergarten, and you're almost 4. Good enough." And it was private school, so they didn't have that age restriction. I just had to. I just was in class, and so when other kids were like, literally, I still remember this. It was at Temple Christian, which is it's gone now, but it was on Lake June Road in Pleasant Grove, Texas.
I love the fact the Hindu kid went to a Christian private school.
Because, there were...
that's where the joke comes from.
Yeah,
that makes so much more sense.
It is, right? And and then the whole idea is because there was no, that you had to be born on this date or this month.
September 2nd is the cutoff.
Whatever.
I deal with it because of one of my kids kind of falls into that.
Okay, so so private schools didn't have that. They're like, "You got the money?
Yeah.
Come on in."
They don't care.
He's 4, and you want kindergarten?
I mean, they care, but if you have the mental aptitude, they will be able to.
And I can still see it. I can still remember this one very specific moment, like it was yesterday. There was a girl. Her name was Emily Schumacher, and I remember she had gray eyes, but she gray eyes.
Interesting.
Yeah, like stone gray eyes. But she was outlining. They had the little alphabet with the little dashes on it, and you would just connect the dashes to make. So you were training your hand how to write an A and a B, and I remember grabbing a book and sitting in a beanbag chair and reading, while everybody else was
tracing
their letters.
Yeah.
And so that, like I said, they didn't know what to do with me. So they're like, "There's a beanbag chair. Go grab some books and piss off.
Go knock yourself out."
Yeah, just go sit over there because we don't know. So I was a small kid and I got bullied. These kids were so much bigger, and there's strength. And anywhere you go, there's strength in numbers. And it was just me and our family. Me and my older brother were the only 2 Indian kids in this town. So we were easy target because we couldn't group up with anybody.
Right.
And so I learned my dad would get his haircut when he would get his haircut in Old Mesquite. And when he got his haircut, he would always steal their Reader's Digest every single time. As he said, he was, I'll give it back. I'm just borrowing for right now. He never gave it back. But in the back were jokes.
Seems like a typical immigrant dad.
Yeah.
It's like it reminds me of stuff my grandpa used to do.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, but it's sitting on their table, nobody using it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
it's collecting dust, might as well.
Yeah, but I'm like, but it's theirs. But they don't know. I'm like, okay, if that's the ideology, they don't know. So
it's kind of like teaching you to steal, but not really at the same time.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's still stealing, but
I borrowing. I guess.
Yeah, I used it for what I needed. I got out of it, so the guilt wasn't on me for taking it. But they had jokes in the back.
Ah, okay.
And I would memorize the jokes, and I would kind of like. If it was talking about, farmer so and so and his, whatever, I would make farmer that guy my dad, and I would make this and this my cousins, whatever. So I would change the joke, and I learned very early on, and I think I'm about 8 at this point, and I remember like 7 or 8, and like memorizing the back of the Reader's Digest to tell these jokes the next day, and I wouldn't tell all of them because I'm like, I need something for tomorrow. And I found out very early on, it takes a very special kind of person to beat you up if they're laughing. And there was one kid who existed that could do that. He's like, "Man, you're hilarious," and then hit me in the face. You know what I mean? So, and then about 9 is when I started doing. My dad would let me watch the Tonight Show.
Okay, cool.
And so I could see like the comics, and there was like people that did voices, and there's people that did this, and they had their routine and all of this, and so I saw the showmanship to it and the pause and whatever. And so I learned to do cartoon voices that were popular at the time, and I learned to do celebrity and this is back in the early '80s. So not a very popular impression, but Bill Cosby back then was, and so I could do that. And I could do Reagan, and I could do a couple other.
How things. The tides have turned, right?
Thought
that one would be the one not to do anymore.
Yeah. And so I could do all of those, and the cartoon voices I would do, and like I could do Donald Duck, and I could do Mickey Mouse, and there was I'm 47. There was a TV show called Punky Brewster, and then they had a cartoon spin-off of this. And for whatever reason, the cartoons had to be completely asinine. So she had a magical bear friend named Glomer, and I could do his one. The girls loved it. And I started to see, like, the girls really, like, every day, hey, you got to do this, and you got to do this voice, and you got to do this. And the guys now want to be my friend.
Because you got the girls around you.
Because I have the girls around me. And I distinctly remember, I believe it was 9. And I was like, oh, I got this. If you make the women laugh, the guys leave you alone.
You cracked the code.
Yeah, at 9.
Nobody had any confidence, and they're like, wait.
Yeah.
I can possibly.
I know I'm not going to be able to date them because I'm 9,
right?
But I also know in the future, like that line hasn't, that line's not going to be crossed. I get it, so I'm aware of that. But I can be friends with them. Yeah. So I found out that I had that power, and I was like blinded by it. I'm like, I'm going to be friends with all of these girls, and that just worked, man. And so, still bullied. There were still those guys out there that didn't care. And football is, it's Texas, and and it was the '80s, and it's still big now. But you have now that the joke is out and viral, and it's millions of views, tens of millions of views now. I have so many parents that are like, I would never let my kid play football, and I'm from Texas, and we don't do this, and he's a big kid, but I still won't. Back then, it's like that was its own religion, was Texas high school football.
I think like after the CTE stuff came out and the documentary.
Yeah, everything once and when you could see like Earl Campbell, who's this great running back at the University of Texas and then played for Houston, the Oilers back then. He would still make appearances, and it was just sad to watch him walk because his knees were so bad and his hips were so bad from years of just getting punished. And every now and again, you'd be at the state fair and like you'd run into some of these cowboy players and you're like, man, is he okay? And you find out. I broke every finger. I broke all my toes. I dislocated a hip. This is all playing high school football. But my whole theory was, I was a very, very smart kid, and I'm like, you know what, I cracked that code. Now I'm going to crack this one. If I sign up to play football, then the football guys that are bullying me, this was the idea, and I'll tell you why behind it.
Okay,
sure. The idea was, well, if I join the football team, then I'm not that nerdy little kid. Okay. I'm a teammate, and you want a simpatico in a teammate. You want an understanding and a bond, and so they won't break that because they're not going to bully me. And what I didn't realize is I'd given them a 3-hour adult supervised, state sanctioned daily ass kicking of me.
Right.
That was completely like they didn't have to find a corner of the high school to push me into a locker or knock the books out of my hand. They just had to wait till 2:30, and then they could do this for 3 hours and knock me around as much as they wanted. And I was from that generation where if you can't beat them, join them.
Right.
That's what my mom, if you can't beat them, join them. I'm like, and now I look back, I'm like, that's an awful thing to tell a kid.
Yeah.
If you can't beat them, join. It should be like, if you can't beat them, find something else.
Find a way.
Find a different group of people to hang out with. And so the first time I knew nothing of football, except for what I watched with my father on Sundays.
Right.
And my dad, till he passed, diehard Cowboys fan. So we would watch the Cowboys games, and I would say to him, I remember when these guys would get hit, I'm like, man, that's gotta hurt. You know how much? It's okay if they hurt. You know how much money they're getting? And it wasn't by now standards, nothing. But back then I was like, oh, okay. So when I thought of playing football in high school, I'm like, we're not going to get hurt. They're not paying us.
Right.
So why would we? And I had to sit out my first week of, this is how small I was. Again, I had to sit out my first week because they had to get my helmet from the junior high. Because nobody asked me a question. They just assumed ninth grade, right?
Yeah.
That he's going to be 13, almost 14. I was 12. You know what I mean? I was 12 walking in, and so.
And you're still in private school at this point.
No. This is now public school.
Now
we're in public school, and so I'm like, yeah, let's play this football. I mean, how hard can it be? We got the pads and the helmet and everything, and they didn't have a helmet small enough for me. Because when I put the helmet they gave me, when I put it on, I could turn my head around without the helmet moving. Oh. That's how big it was.
Yeah, it was massive.
And that was the smallest one they had.
Which is a big problem.
Yeah, so they made me sit out. I just had to sit. I kind of I would run drills with them, but I wouldn't do any tackling or anything or catching football. Nothing. I would just run drills with them. And they had to have it repainted because it was coming from Vanston Middle School, where I went to middle school. It was coming from Vanston Middle School, and they had to repaint it. And I finally got it, and I'm 5'3". I'm 96 pounds. I remember I could barely bench the bar. The bar's 45 pounds.
Yeah.
And I could barely bench the bar. I think I maxed at 45 pounds, which it doesn't sound like you're like, oh, man, that's weak. I'm 95. That's half my body weight. Yeah, that's what I'm pushing is half my body weight. Joke, you know what I mean? I'm pushing half my body weight, guys. These guys some of these guys had beards, and I'm like, I don't even know. Okay. Also,
what you're forgetting is some of these guys are genetically.
Yeah, they're not
the line of cornbread, huge.
Yeah. I mean,
farmland. If you go, not that far. It's it was a lot of farmland here.
Yeah, and we had a couple of guys, and I'm still friends with. I lost touch with one of them, although we have a mutual friend, so I kind of know where he's at and what he's doing. But we had a guy named I won't say their last names, but there was a buddy of mine named Russell, and the guys that went to high school with me that'll watch this will know who I'm talking about. But in 8th grade, I believe he was benching. I think he was maxing 250.
Wow.
And then we had a guy named Jesse.
I mean, that's a lot for a normal size adult.
Yeah, I mean he was just a different species of human. He played varsity. His freshman year, he was on the varsity squad.
So did any of the boys end up going into pro?
He was the one that we went to college together as well. So he played for the college I went to.
Okay.
And the Miami Dolphins came out to scout him, and He was like, you know what? And I remember having this conversation with him in my apartment. He's like, I've been playing since I was in Pee Wee, and I'm tired. And so he's a teacher.
Really?
He was a teacher in Houston, and he had the Dolphins we're ready to sign you. And he's like, no, I'm done. I've been playing this since I was 6 years old. And he was that was his thing. He got a scholarship to college, and he did his thing, and he was good. And he's like, okay, now I want to have a life that's not surrounded by playing football every year.
How interesting is that?
But then there was a guy who I'm friends with today, and I can say his last name because you'll hear it every Sunday, who went to the same high school, but years later, and that's Malik Jefferson, who plays for the Dallas Cowboys.
Hey, shout out Malik Jefferson.
Yeah, and so there are those guys that like you see now, like that are from this high school that went pro, because it is one of those programs that is very, very football centric, and one of those high schools that's very football centric. But so that I got my helmet, and I remember they're like, okay, we're going to take you. It's tackling drills. I'm like, all right, let's do it. What is it? And they're like, oh no, don't worry about it. I'm like, no, but can you just tell me what we're going to do? Well, that guy's going to hit you. Oh, okay. Well, I have all the pads in the world. This is great. And they paired me up with my buddy Michael, who. Back then, I think he was 5'6", 5'7", but he was 145, 155 pound offensive lineman.
That's a much bigger dude.
Substantially bigger. And the first time he hit me, I remember getting hit. I remember like it was yesterday. It was hot, extremely hot. It's 2-a-days, which I didn't know. And I do the joke about that too, where I'm like, I didn't even know what a 2-a-day was, and I'm Indian. We're good at math. So you had to be there at 7:30 in the morning, and then you had a break, and I think we went back at like 2:30 in the afternoon.
So this is a grueling program.
Yeah. It was every day, 2 days in the Texas heat, full pads. I think the first day of 2 days, I could be wrong. It's been so long ago, but I think the first day we were in shorts and just our T-shirt, and then I think the rest of it was pads and full pads, the whole 9 yards, and. They're like, okay, so I have the ball in my hand, and his objective is to take me down, and it was effortless. And he hit me, and it's no fault of his own. This is just what he's been doing since he was in Pee Wee, and it knocked me unconscious.
Wow!
Like I got hit so hard. I remember getting hit, and then that was it. Like, and I literally thought, I've died. I was like, that was it. I was like, I'm going to have the worst story to tell these people where it is I'm going, that this is how I died. And I opened my eyes, and I'm in someone's lap. Because, again, that's how small I was. I was being cradled.
Now I understand why you got bullied so much, man.
Yeah, I was a really tiny kid.
You were just an easy target.
100%. So that's why I don't fault anybody. That's why I'm not bitter about it. That's why I found the joke in it. I'm like, I did this. Everybody around me is like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, no, you don't understand. Those are the guys that intimidate me the most. So I'm going to be part of that group, because that's how I'm going to overcome my fear of them, and that's how they're going to get to know me. And so it was that moment, and I wake up, and again, I'm being cradled, and I look up, and I see the first thing I see is the sun is behind this person. So I just see the outline of a sun, and then I see the outline of a body. And then I see shoulder-length blonde hair.
Oh, God.
And my first thought was, my mom, we're very, very traditional Hindu family, right? So they believe in all paths to God. And so there was, above our fireplace was the old painting of Jesus, the blonde hair, with the blonde beard.
The light behind him.
Yeah. The looking away. And the Olin Mills portrait. Shout out Jamie Hogan. I see the shoulder-length blonde hair, and then I see the sun, so it's glowing.
Okay.
And my first thought was, I've died, because Jesus is holding me, right? And it turned out it was our high school trainer, Sarah Wolfskill, Coach Wolfskill, who is retired now, so I can say her name. And I've talked to her about the story. But that's who was holding me. And but my immediate thought was, I've gone. That was it. That's how I died. He hit me so hard in the head. Like, he hit me so hard, it rattled my brain, and my body stopped.
So is that the entire set, kind of?
Yeah.
Because I got like a small portion of it the other night.
Yeah. No, I just
do
the
Reverend. You did like a very kind of
very
annotated version of it.
Yeah, very small version, because my time was limited.
Oh man, that's such a funny story.
Yeah, the actual full bit. Now, when I wrote the joke, it was about 40 seconds long. But the entire thing now on stage is about almost a 20-minute.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's almost 20 minutes in its entirety, if I go from beginning to end.
I mean, I can only imagine, like, there's so many parts here that have tags and throwbacks, and like you can call back to certain things that haven't, like, Even the describing the Jesus photo.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
hilarious. Like there's a whole side note of it on your mom that goes into it. It's
really
good.
So that's the whole idea. Like that's the first thought I had, is that's who's come to get me. And then my second thought was, why didn't any of my gods come?
Okay, hold that thought real quick.
Yeah.
When did this joke come to you? Or how did this entire 20 minute, like it starts at 40 seconds, but when did these 40 seconds actually come to you?
When I was first starting to do stand up, and you write your first 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is. You write about you and your personal experiences. So what I was doing was I was writing a lot of the material on my parents and my family.
So the self-deprecation that most comedians, kind of incorporate.
Yeah, but I wasn't incorporating a lot of myself.
Okay.
And a note that I got from just an audience member was an older black lady, and she's like, I thought you were great, and I'd love to meet your parents, but I know nothing about you.
Such wisdom.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Such beautiful wisdom.
That makes sense. I didn't really say anything about me, so I'm like, I remember jotting stuff down, and I was like, oh, the football thing would be kind of funny, because I was getting booked very early on. I was getting booked quite a bit, and one of them was Christian Comedy Night, even though I'm not Christian. I'm not anymore, but I was 100% clean. So I wrote what I remembered of that joke, and then when I wrote it all out, I just kind of removed pieces of it to make it very quick. Mm-hmm. And so the joke was, and if you watch the one that's gone viral, that was the one I did at Hermosa Beach Comedy and Magic Club. Is
that the one with the leather jacket?
No. This is the one. It's the blue background. It's the one that's got the most views of mine. I think it's like 4.9 million.
Ooh, that's crazy.
Views on Instagram. But if you look at that, like the joke is 1 minute and 18 seconds long, and that's incorporating a tag. So I wrote it. I'm like, okay, that's really quick. Hits them. I can use that as a closer, and so that was my closer forever.
Okay.
And then as I started getting more and more years in, and more time, and now I'm headlining, I'm like, you know what? Now I can tell a longer version of the story. And as the years went, I just put more of the story in, because now they're not like, when you're featuring, they'll go, okay, can you do 20? Okay, well, I can't have one joke that's 20 minutes long, right?
Right,
They'll be like, he did one joke the whole time. So when I started headlining, I was like, I'm still going to close with this joke. I'm still going to close with I saw Jesus. I'm still going to close with that, but I'm going to tell you the whole story now. And this is probably the best part for me, is when I was at the Improv in Addison just a couple of weeks ago, one of the guys that was on the team was there.
Okay.
And you can see me. I posted a couple of clips, but you can see me point at him a couple of times. And he was one of the guys that bullied me. And I talked about it on stage, and I was like, you know what? I believe in adversity. I believe in bullies in the sense that if it wasn't, and I say this on stage, if it wasn't for the Joker, there's no need for Batman. And if there's no Lex Luthor, Superman's useless. And I told him on stage, I go, you were my bad guy. And if it wasn't for that guy, I wouldn't have tried as hard as I did. I quit as quick as possible, but I wasn't going to get out until I played. Like, that was the goal. I'm going to play. Because the first year when I was, again, 5'3", I think 5'5" by the time the school ended, but I played 7 seconds.
Seriously, you graduated high school?
No. I graduated
2 inches taller.
No. When my freshman year ended.
Okay, I'm sorry.
2 or 3 inches. I grew that, but no. When I graduated high school, I was 6 feet tall.
Okay,
like 5'11".
Because you're not a short person. You know?
No. 6'1" now.
So you played a total of 7 seconds.
7 seconds my freshman year.
Wow.
And then we went to India for the entire summer between my freshman and sophomore year.
Which I have to ask you, why do you go from one really hot place in the summer to a place
that was
probably just as hot, if not hotter?
Hotter.
Is it hotter?
Hotter, yeah. Okay. So the idea was my dad lived there for 10 years. My mom was there 17. And the winters in London, the UK, were brutal. My mom, at one point, I think a few years in, slipped on ice and shattered her kneecap.
Oh.
And she's like, she was a nurse.
That lasted forever, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there was always arthritis. There was always, some sort of...
Because you're talking about, like, 70s, 80s?
70s.
Yeah, knee replacements and the technology today, stem cells.
None
of that exists.
No. And she was a nurse, so she's always on her feet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she did the full rehab. She was back at about, I mean, I think the most she ever got back on that leg was about 90%. But then there's always arthritis. There's always inflammation because she's constantly standing and she's constantly running and she's constantly moving. So back in the 60s in the hippie movement here in the U.S., a lot of people dropped out of school, dropped out of college. So there were a lot of really high profile, not high profile, but jobs that required college degrees or specialties, and nurses being one of them. So now if you look back, the influx of Indian people into this country was around 73 to 78 is a big, maybe even 81, is a big influx of Indians coming into the U.S. because tech jobs were starting to become a thing.
Yeah, the tech sector is getting huge.
It's getting bigger. And so is the medical field. So you have doctors and nurses coming in. And the reason, because so many people had dropped out. And so what they did was, they were, I think prior to 73 or 72, the number of Indians that were allowed in through Immigration Naturalization Services, I think was around 2,000 per year. And then it jumps to like 5,500, 7,800, 10,000. So my mom gets offered a job in London. There was like a job fair, and all these people came out from the U.S. And the goal, back then for immigrants, especially in India, was the U.S. That was the goal.
Not the U.K.
Not the U.K. was like the stepping stone. Like a lot of people stayed. They got to the U.K. and did very well, and stayed. But the idea was, if you can get to America. Like the dollar translated so much better back home. So the idea, it's every immigrant's idea, not every. Let me rephrase it. My parents' thing was, we'll make our money here and then go back. They don't go back, because when we would go back, it's too hot, and we have air conditioning here, and our cars have air conditioning, and cabs have air conditioning, and we'd go back to India, and you get in a cab that's no AC, or you get on a train that has, and they're like, this place is miserable, and I would laugh. My mom and I would laugh all the time. I'm like, you grew up here. It's like, yeah, but you don't realize how hot it is until you have all these luxuries.
You know what's funny? That's a sentiment that runs through almost all immigrant communities.
Yeah.
So us Armenians, there's like this massive population of dads and moms of a certain age that want nothing more than to go back.
Yeah, and retire.
But for some odd reason, it never happens. They always have some excuse, delay, because they, exactly like you said, they visited a few years ago, and they were like, yeah, it's cool and all, but exactly like you said, a lot of taxis don't have AC, a lot of homes don't have AC. It gets seriously hot in the summer, really, really cold in the winter.
Yep.
The infrastructure on the roads is great. It's great a lot of the time, but sometimes it isn't.
India is like, it's great in some parts, and it's horrifying. That's why it takes, it's so funny because my mom's, where my mom grew up, and from New Delhi to where my mom, I don't think it's maybe 100 some odd miles.
So are your mom and dad from the same region of India?
No, my mom's from Haryana, my dad's from Delhi.
So north and south?
No, they're both North Indian.
Just
different sections. 4 hours away. Just 4 hours. But the same region, yes, but from North India. But it's 4 hours by car because you're going when people are like, we have to go 60 kilometers an hour, like, wow.
Yeah, right.
And then you do math and you're like, that's 30 miles an hour. You know what I mean? So
you're not doing much.
So you're like 120 miles away. You're getting there in 4 hours. And that's if the roads are good. And then that's also if a cow doesn't decide he's going to stop in the middle of the road.
Yeah, and once you're outside of the big cities, there's a lot of rural,
it happens.
cities.
I've been stuck in traffic in Mumbai for an hour and a half because there's a cow right there, and you can't move it.
Because it's sacred. Considered sacred and holy, right?
Can't do anything to it. People will get out of the car and kind of like yell at it, but I'm like, that's hilarious.
Is the sacredness of the cow coming because it provides milk?
Yes. So everything is there for a reason, and the cow provides milk, butter. Mm-hmm. When you dry cow dung, it's odorless, and it burns pure.
Yeah.
So you can cook with it. The cow will bear an ox, and the ox can plow that land. So you can eat that cow and eat for 6 weeks, or you can use all of its resources and eat endlessly, but it's a vegetarian diet, right? So, and then you go, well, how do we get people to believe? Because there's no mechanization, or back then there wasn't. There were no tractors, plows, pulleys, none of that stuff. So
Right.
you would
You
put
need the ox.
Yeah, you would need the ox. You put a wooden plank down on the ground. You'd put 2 pieces of metal behind it to dig into the ground, and you whip your ox, and he'd go up and down the field all day long. As long as you keep feeding him, he's going to keep plowing, and you're going to get butter and milk and all of the resources that come with that cow. And so let's make it religious.
Interesting.
Right? Even though they won't tell you, but India produces 1/3 of the world's leather. Comes from India, and then it's one of the largest exporters of beef.
I didn't know any of this.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Is it the people that are, because there's vast religions in India.
Yeah. So you're gonna go with, so that's the idea. Like you have the leather traders that are, but
Christian or something, I guess, or whatever.
I wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I guess I don't know. I met a guy in India when I was over there touring, and he was very Hindu, but he was a huge leather trader, and so I don't know if the product's already made. I don't know how that works. I've never asked. I just know that if you look up just business wise, India provides one third of the world's leather.
I think maybe the workaround to that would be is like the cow, even religiously speaking, eventually would die.
Will die,
Then
yes.
It would be sacrilege not to use.
That is
the
correct.
Skin
There
that
are a lot of these places where they will take in cows from the street, and when they do pass, they do utilize that. There's a lot of that as well. But there is a large beef export that comes out. There might not be now because Narendra Modi, the prime minister, there's a beef ban and has been since he was put in office.
What does that mean, a beef ban?
Nobody's allowed to have beef in India
At all?
No.
Well, how does that work with the people that don't, ascribe to that religion? Isn't it
it's
unfair to them?
Yeah, but it's
is
also
there no constitution that protects?
No.
Okay.
No, because you have a parliament that was almost all represented by the same ideology that went, okay, we'll ban it. And then it's an underground thing now. So it's like drugs, right?
What is the deal with drugs in India? How is it legal? Is it illegal?
No. There's no there's no legal drugs. But everywhere you go, you can get hash, you can get coke, you can get. I've seen it.
Because certain parts of the world, certain things are just legal there.
Yeah, like India, I think it's whatever payday is. So every Friday or every other Friday, the liquor stores are closed because laborers will go in and just drink their paychecks away.
Oh.
So they close the liquor stores, and then there's dry days. So like Republic Day in India Independence Day is a dry day, so you can't go buy alcohol, and then no restaurants or hotels will serve alcohol, even though you could be from the U.S. and it has nothing. Their Independence Day has nothing to do with you, right?
Yeah, mine was 2 days ago.
Right. Yeah, mine's India's independence is August 15th. Ours was July 4th. Right. So, but yeah, so like you can be from here, go there, and you're staying in a hotel and you want a beer. Well, it's our Independence Day. Well, I'm a tourist.
Right.
That's not a thing. And you get some places that are like, all right, we'll sneak it to you. Same with beef. Like if I'm not going to say where I was. I was in South India, and I was at a restaurant, and my food came out, and it wasn't great.
Uh-huh.
And I had gotten a pork chop that when you took all the seasonings and the little sauce they had made, when it was just a thing of pork fat.
Oh, there's no actual meat.
There was very little meat on it, and so I kind of complained. And the chef came out, and over there, like the chefs take that. It's like going to a restaurant, a 5-star restaurant here. If you complain about the food, the chef will come out and be like, "What's wrong with my food?"
Okay, they take personal offense.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
it.
So he came out, and I was like, "This is pork fat," and he's like, where are you from?" I said, "I'm from the U.S. We get pork chops here. Like I know what pork chops in America look like." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. This is all they give me." I was like, "Well, go ahead and just take it off my bill because I'm not. I didn't even eat it. I just cut it, and I could see. I was like, you can just take this off. I'm not going to eat anything here if that's the quality." It's like he kind of looked around the restaurant. He's like, you want a steak?" And I felt like I was, and I don't do drugs, but I felt like I was in the middle of a drug deal. And he's like looked around. He's like, "You want to do a steak?" And I'm like, "Can you?" And he's like, "I got you."
It almost sounds like he's offering you a tiger steak.
That would have been awesome.
You know what I mean? Like food that is, it even feels weird to talk about kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's what it was. And I was like, and I have friends over there that are Muslims and that are Christians that are Jewish. I'm like, "What do you guys do?" And they're like, "There's an underground." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" Like, no, man. So
like
my buddy has
WhatsApp group or something, and they give you pictures of the meat that's being delivered that
I
week.
don't know. I don't know how it works, but I do know my buddy who has a restaurant It's not my buddy. I've met him a million times. It's my favorite place to go in Mumbai. One of my favorite places. It's a place called Eddie's, and he's known for his cheeseburger. And back in the day, it was ground beef, and then the beef ban happened. He's like, "Oh, okay. Well, there's no ban on water buffalo."
Ooh, awesome.
Yeah, and it's really good. It's really like
So it's more of a gamey kind
it's
of
not
taste
it's
to it,
it's
or
not
no?
it's not gamey. It's almost a similar taste. It's just a little richer. Not ga- it's like it's a heavier protein.
Okay.
So when you would get like a quarter pound cheeseburger, you can knock that out. Like
Yeah.
a quarter pound water buffalo. You're like halfway through. You're like, well, I'm full.
So it's less fat, more
Right,
dense muscle.
more dense muscle. Yeah, and so he just went around it. He's like, okay, well, I won't do the beef. I'll just do water buffalo. So so that's where that comes into play. Is let's make this whole. We keep the cow because it sustains more people. Now I don't know what that does. I mean, I've seen driving in India. I've seen like going to different places. How many carcasses I see on the side from them
Right.
crossing the street and getting hit by a truck or whatever it is. So I see that, and that's unfortunate. And then I've been there before where you see them just literally starving in the street because they're sacred, but nobody's feeding them necessarily. That I've seen a few times. They're just rummaging through trash
Because there's no grass for them to.
because the cities have taken over.
Yeah.
So, and then from a humane side in my head, because that's the logical humane, like somebody needs to put that out of its suffering. So put it out of its misery. And then you're like, oh my God, I can't believe you say something like that. I'm like, yeah, but I can't believe you're letting him. Well, that's the life that he was supposed to live. I'm like, who's deciding this? So I've always been conflicted between religion and logic. And so, I mean, I understand the principles of it. I understand the mythology behind it. I understand I'm a very spiritual person. I mean, I have my stuff on, and I believe in spirituality. I believe as long as you don't hurt anybody, all paths to God is right. But I mean, I can see something and go, you gotta put that out. You gotta put that out of its misery. So,
I mean, to the people that say, this is the life it's supposed to lead and all this.
yeah.
At some point, you should ask the logical question of, but was it really supposed to be
That's
the life,
what
or did humans come in and interfere with what the life would have been?
That's my thing. But
now our own guilt does not allow us to take this poor animal out of its misery.
But then there's the flip side too, and that's why I talk about growing up in Mesquite with Indian parents, and I understand like the cowboy and the Indian, like I get it, right? Because
different Indian, but yeah.
Because I got to see that side of it. Like I remember there was a block party one time. It wasn't a block party. It was like just a couple of houses decided they were going to grill and all that stuff. And my dad would drink Coors Banquet, like the original in the beige yellowish can or whatever.
Oh yeah. They brought that back, right?
Yeah.
A while ago.
Yeah, but that was his beer. And there's a neighbor that was a couple door down. He was in charge of grilling, so he had burgers out and hot dogs and ribs. And here my dad, who's a vegetarian, my mom, who ate everything but beef. But here they are sitting there, and there's literally outside of like corn and some some baked beans that they made sure didn't have ham in it or bacon or whatever, pork in it, and cornbread. And I remember my buddy's dad kept coming and was like, Miss Sharma, how's the hamburgers? He's like, oh, it's lovely. It's very nice. It's so good. And then like a couple hours later, they're just sitting there being polite because they didn't want to say anything.
Right.
Being
good guests. Yeah.
And so they were just admiring the hospitality. And so, can you get you another beer? Oh, another beer. Yes, thank you. Have you had the ribs? I have never had ribs this good in my life. What's the secret? He's like, oh, I can't tell you that. That's okay. One day I'll find out. And then getting home at like 6 o'clock. At any point it was on our street.
Yeah.
They could have just left. But when everybody was finished, when everybody's wrapping everything up, they went home and they made lentils and rice.
And they actually had something to eat.
They hadn't eaten in days, just shoveling this in their face. And I'm like, and it hit me. I think I was like 12 or 13, and it hit me. I'm like, oh my God, they didn't want them to feel bad.
Yeah,
which was amazing to me. I'd never seen that before because everybody was like, well, there's nothing here for me to eat, and you'd hear people say that, like, oh man, I don't like ribs, and I hear other people talking about it. I'm like, and there's my parents like literally with some corn and cornbread. And just sitting there, and every time my buddy's dad would come over, so how's the hot dog? Oh, I don't know. I couldn't eat another bite.
Yeah.
After the ribs and the hamburger, nothing. And it was hilarious, and then seeing that side of it. So I got that perspective of getting to be in a house that had religion and hospitality and spirituality and also logic. My mom would tell me, would secretly agree, yeah, I mean, it is our fault. We built around their hood.
Right.
We built around. Well, we started putting roads in where their fields were.
Yeah, we displaced all these animals.
Yeah, and so what do we do with them now? Where are they supposed to go? Now, if they built places, my mom would well, if we build, them a stable, and I was like, yeah, but they're not doing that. So they are now. It's just I don't know how it is in Armenia, but animal rescues, that's just a new phenomenon in India, where puppy rescues, because if you look, I don't know how it is back there, but dogs run in packs in the streets in India in some parts, and so they're just now getting them to where they rescue them and put them in a no-kill shelter and all that stuff.
So I left the country when I was a kid. I was 5.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
My wife left a lot later.
Okay.
And she would say that was a big thing over there.
Yeah.
Outside of the capital city, anywhere else you went, there were groups of dogs that just were the neighborhood dogs.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty much. No ownership, but they just exist.
Yeah, there's somebody always will throw some food out there for them to eat, or they'll find it or whatever it is, but they manage.
Yeah, the few times I've been able to visit in recent years, again, I've just been in the capital city area, so I haven't been privy to if it is or isn't an issue that has been resolved.
Yeah.
Looking at the way things are in the political climate of Armenia and abroad with all of its issues that it has right now, I don't think it's a top priority for anybody.
No.
Nor do I blame them. That's more of hey, we kind of figured shit out. Now we can deal with a lot of the smaller things that exist. But on a grander scale, there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Yeah. I mean, I think every country can say that.
Because Armenia is still a baby, technically. The government, the Republic of Armenia, it's not that old. The Soviet Union goes to hell, and then Armenia has to kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
And they're still figuring it out.
Yeah.
So I don't, no fault of their own that they have.
Yeah, and then you also had a genocide in the middle of all of the figuring out.
Well, no, the genocide happened. That was the 1915 genocide.
Oh, I thought there was one. I thought there was one after that that they didn't recognize or something.
That is the one.
That is the one. Okay, I thought there was one after.
That's the Ottoman Empire.
That's my fault. Okay.
Ethnic cleansing.
Oh, that's what it was.
Of the Armenians in Turkey.
Yeah, and
whole thing.
But nobody recognized it until recently.
So the United States didn't recognize it for a very, very long time, even though it's very highly documented. There's photographs, there's records of all of this stuff. Yeah. It's not something that you can. It happened, in the 1900s. We had all the equipment and stuff to keep records.
Yeah.
But that was the big issue. It was Armenia was advocating for someone big like the United States to recognize what happened and acknowledge it. And then finally, I think the Biden administration they acknowledged it in some respect.
Yeah.
But the big issue with all of that was just the world kind of denying it, and then now the world has started to stop denying it more.
Ours was, the British were very famous for divide and conquer.
And
that's what they did. And so when they left India in 1946, 47, it was the war between India and Pakistan. Both my parents were in that war. And there were millions of people killed. But it was also at the same time that Germany was being defeated. The Nazis were being defeated. So that was making the headlines. It wasn't like that situation where people were no, that's not happening. People were well, that's happening, but look at how this is happening. And so it just kind of got overshadowed by the situation in the world because you have World War II happening, and this is going on as well at the ass end of it all. So,
and unfortunately, this happens time and time again. The Rwandan genocide happened, and the world didn't really do much about it. And you can come up with countless countries where, even the India-Pakistan thing, it's I feel like you guys are the same people killing each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I mean, that's the thing, right? That's
I know you recognize yourselves as different, but aren't you the same? Aren't we all kind of
that's,
you know what I mean?
That's the whole.
Not to offend anyone in any way. I don't understand the geopolitics of that.
But that's the idea of successful wars. Is the idea of if you're going to have a war and it be successful and not just an onslaught of just human lives being destroyed, is you have to know who the enemy is and they have to look different than you. because if they look the same, then you're just shooting aimlessly, right? So
Yeah.
you're just killing, and it wasn't uncommon for that to happen. And that's when back in the day, that's where the Sikh religion comes from. Sikhs come from Hindus.
So the warrior class.
Warrior class, and what happened was is what Aurangzeb was just like he was coming through. He's the emperor. He was coming through, and he's destroying villages of Hindus and so on and so forth. And Guru Gobind Singh, the last Sikh guru, his father was killed, and he said wasn't there any Hindus to protect my father?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, we all look alike. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to change that.
Right.
We're going to be able to we'll be definitive to what we look like, and so that's where the traditional
the wardrobe of the Sikhs comes from.
Yeah, the traditional the what you see, it was developed because it's like we need to have an identity so that if in any situation anywhere in the world, you will know who
we are,
who you are. And if you need help, you can see it. And if you need somebody to have your back, if you need somewhere to go, if you need someone, if you need a resource, it's there. So
it's very smart.
Yeah, but
undeniably smart.
Yeah, but so I mean, I got to grow up with all of these different ideas and ideologies and religions and all of this stuff, and so I have an appreciation for all of it. But it was going back to what I was saying about people in religion is so many people, like with the Jesus football joke, will come after me religiously, and they'll be like, well, your God, because I was like, I don't know why nobody else is like, why my gods didn't show up and this one did, even though it was my high school trainer who was a lady with blonde hair.
I mean, that's genuinely what makes the joke
Yeah.
unique.
Yeah.
It makes it original because like there's probably been a million jokes about being hit and seeing Jesus.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen them. But
I'm saying
sure
football in general, but like, somebody gets hit.
Or see God or something like that. Sure.
But your take on it is what made it so funny. Is like you're like, not even my God. Dude,
even yesterday, somebody's like, well, that's because your gods aren't real, and I'm like, man, it's a joke. Like that's what I was talking about. Is like you can't, when it comes down to censorship and it comes down to like these people going, well, we don't like that you do that joke like that. There's that whole chasm that's out there that's going to go, we don't like him because he does a joke where he makes fun of Jesus. I'm not making fun of Jesus. You don't realize that there was that's who I thought, that's who I equated where I was going, and just wondering why my guys didn't show. The whole thing is, the idea is it's a joke. And I think we've lost sight in some aspects. There's some things where I'm like, I've seen some clips that go out and I'm like, yeah, that's just it's number one, not just a bad joke, it's in bad taste.
Yes.
And it's designed to offend. Now, that's there are people that like that. There's that group. But I see some of that stuff where it's designed to offend a group. It's designed to hurt somebody. I don't do any of that. I don't have the time. I don't have the capacity to sit there and isolate my brain to decide I'm going to dislike a certain group of people or a certain base or whatever. I'm like, I think that's funny, so I'm going to write it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's very interesting. And you're just talking about like people coming to your shows now. Does that take away from it? I'm like, well, I know that person's not coming, and whoever thinks like that's not coming. So, you're going to miss a really good show.
But do you want those people anyways?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's just the one sensibility that they're like, hey, listen, I can't get past this. Then no. But if they can go, I didn't like that joke. Let me see what else he's got. I like that. I look at it like
the true range of a real comedian is you're going to hit
a nerve. Yeah.
No, the way not just hitting the nerve, but the way I look at a really good comedian that's got like 20 or 30 an hour set, something long, is you're gonna keep hitting different groups of people.
Yeah.
But everybody's gonna continue to be laughing. So like you're gonna have general jokes, and then you're gonna have specific kind of like this group will identify with it, that group will identify with it.
Yeah.
That's like, I think that's the true arc of a great comedian, is like finding those.
Yeah, and I don't, and that's the thing. Like, I'm not offensive. I'm not.
No, not at all.
I don't. There's no malice behind anything I say. There's no. I mean, it's just coming from a place of having fun, because the last show I was saying, I was like, life is undefeated, and so we need to start looking at that. Start remembering that again. It's like nobody gets out of this one alive, right? So we need to do what we can to have fun and to have that lightheartedness that comes with, like, I remember my parents, having dinner parties and the uncle jokes and the dad jokes, as they're called now, like all that stuff. And they'd say the same joke 1,000 times and everybody knew the punchline, but they all still laughed because they had to go back to the factory tomorrow, or they had to go back to the office tomorrow, or they have to go back. So why not laugh now? And even though I've heard that joke 1,000 times, I'm still going to laugh. And so I saw that need for release and escapism. And whether you find that in religion or if you find that in food, whatever you find comfort in, like I think we've lost sight of I know from an artist side. I'll just say, let me say we. I say I. Sometimes I will write something and go, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I don't want that to hurt anybody's feelings. Even though I know it shouldn't, but I don't want to be in that now where I'm like, if I wrote that joke 20 years ago, it would have been fine. Nobody would have said anything. But then, I don't know where the line. There used to be a definitive line in the sand, and now I don't think we know where that line is. So everybody's kind of pumping the brakes on what they think. Not everybody. Let me just say me. There's times where I'll start to write something and go, if I did that, if that gets out, and that gets enough, whatever. Even though I think it's funny, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I think that's where a lot of it is going now, and I hope, because everything's cyclical, I hope it gets back to where everybody can just understand, like, hey, tomorrow we got to go back to the grind, and tomorrow this, and tomorrow cancer, and tomorrow gun violence, and tomorrow like whatever can happen in a moment's notice, right? So if we can always take away from whatever show we're watching, whatever entertainment, it's entertainment. That's the thing. It is to entertain. And so it's not everybody's gonna like everything, right?
No, and I think the unfortunate, my opinion of it, this is just for me.
Yeah.
When comedians, artists, entertainers begin to do that, have that thought in their head,
yeah,
it is for me the simultaneous beginning of the destruction of a society.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the thing, right?
Because we're not changing the Constitution. You still have freedom of speech.
Yeah.
But if you want to be available on platforms that can potentially help you live, as an artist, then those thoughts come up for some reason.
Yeah, but it's not for some reason, and I can say this because I've seen it happen with a couple of people, and they're fine, but for a minute or whatever, I don't think people understand the consequence of that action, right? So when they go, oh, I don't like that. This person said that. I don't like it, so we're going to stop. There's a livelihood behind it. Behind that person could be I don't know. There could be a family. There could be kids. There could be people that are reliant on that person's paycheck.
Yeah.
And because you didn't like something, and because and maybe it was offensive. I don't know I'm just giving you a hypothetical, but there are people that are dependent on that income, even if it's just yourself. If you go, well, I have to pay rent and I have to pay bills, and this is what I think is funny. I didn't mean it for it to be this way, and it was whatever it was. There is I wouldn't say the destruction of society. I can see what you mean by that, but I would think the destruction of their society, of that person's, not being able to.
I know what you're looking at it like on a micro level. I look at it as a macro level of, a ship can take a certain amount of cracks in the hull before it bursts.
Yeah.
But if nobody maintains those cracks and actually repairs them, eventually there will be enough.
Yeah.
This is one of those like big cracks for me that needs immediate attention, because part of the whole concept of this country was that, First Amendment right. And that's how us, the regular us, I'll talk about just me, get information on when we're being stupid. It is more important than the news. It is more important than Becky and her update on the cake on Facebook or whatever it is. Knowing when as a society we are being dumb and to correct is so important.
And it is, I come from an old school in the sense that, like, I cut my teeth on Richard Pryor and Red Fox and
George Carlin probably.
George Carlin. I didn't like the last couple of specials as he was older. I think it was
a very different George Carlin.
It was a very different George Carlin. But Stephen Wright, I remember I'll tell you, this is so funny because
Stephen Wright.
He's so great. And I remember I was going to India, and we were on, I think it was Pan Am. I think was or
Oh
was,
my God.
yeah, Pan Am, or it was Lufthansa, one of the two. But they had a comedy channel, and I was like, that's all I'm listening to, the entire, however many hours it would take back then with layovers and all this. And it was Stephen Wright, it was Cosby, and it was, I can't remember who the other person was, but that's it. And it was on a loop.
Wow.
And so I just listened to that entire loop for the entire flight there and the entire flight back. And I was just absolutely mesmerized by the ridiculousness of Stephen Wright.
Yeah.
It is so beyond absurdist that it's just brilliant. But then I watched, the first thing that I ever saw was Delirious. It was Eddie Murphy. That was the first comedy show. That was the first comedy experience I had outside of me telling my little stupid stories.
But you can watch Delirious
Still
or
holds
Raw
up
right now.
I
It's
didn't,
perfect.
I didn't like. I'll tell you this. You're gonna get people going. I can't believe it. It was my favorite. I didn't like Raw.
Really?
Didn't like it.
How come? What was it about Raw that, Delirious,
I think
everybody calls it one of the best stand-up specials ever.
Delirious is.
But for me, Raw was not any less.
I thought it
Eddie
was.
and it is just.
I thought it was a little more like the whole of you give me half Eddie, like that whole thing. I'm like, that didn't happen, but the barbecue where his cousin was on fire did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it came from a real place and not a made up place. And I think when he came out and he did the whole Raw special, I think it was it was designed to not tell you anything more about him. It was just designed to set up scenarios that are funny. Right? So anybody can take that bit of having an African wife. I can take that bit and make her Indian.
Right.
You can take that bit and make her Armenian because it didn't happen.
Right.
But it is possible. Right. You know what I mean?
No, I get
but
what
like him going to the barbecue and his dad being drunk and talking about how his wife's a Bigfoot. Like that's
You shaved that bitch?
Yeah.
Eddie?
Yeah. But like when he's like, your wife's a Bigfoot, Gus. Like
yes.
But like I can see a drunk person doing that because I've been around a bunch of like my people, my Punjabi people. Like when we're having barbecues or we're having dinner parties and somebody gets drunk and starts the truth wagon comes out.
Oh yeah, man, it
like,
happens in our culture too.
It's so brilliant, and I'm like, oh, this is hilarious. They're gonna be tomorrow. There's gonna be phone calls, and he had too much to drink. He just wanted to say sorry, like that.
But you can gauge it by the empty bottles.
Yeah, of course.
That night? Is it going to be a happy night, a fight night? Is it going to be everybody crying in a circle at the end of the night?
Yeah.
You can just tell by the alcohol and the amount that is consumed.
Yeah, well, the sign of a good party back in the day, and this was very much at least what my father would say, is if they broke out Red Label, Johnny Walker's like, there must be tough times. Why is it not Black Label? And I'm like, well, not everybody likes Black Label. Everybody should like Black. Well, they don't. And then my dad would be like, oh, they serve Black Label. We'll serve Chivas. It's like if they serve Chivas, then we'll serve Royal Salute. I'm like, where does this end? Then you're just gonna have some guy making scotch. Like that's the height of it, is when there's a guy distilling it in our backyard, and that's when it's the purest form. But you break out like the Johnny Walker Black, and if it was like cracking open a second one, at a third one, I'm like, yeah, there's somebody passing out in our bathroom, and we found many an uncle in the bathroom just passed out, pants around his ankles, trying to take a dump and just falling asleep
so not to that extreme with us, but in our culture, especially the one like the men that grew up in Armenia and then immigrated here later on, for them, mulberry vodka.
Okay.
And it's almost always homemade, and it's way above 40. It's like turpentine, dude.
Yeah. That's what they drink in India. It's like almost turpentine.
It'll put hair on your back, literally.
Yeah.
I've had it like twice, and no.
The thing was, so if you watch, and I know they do in Armenia, Bollywood movies are really big.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if you go back and watch old school Bollywood movies, they're always drinking. It's called VAT 69.
I've seen that. Yeah.
It's always. So every time, and I still remember it, there was a bottle in my parents' house, and I'm like, hilariously, nobody drinks it.
Is it that bad?
I never had it. I don't even know if they still make it. But if they do, and if somebody's watching and they do, tell me where we can get it, because I would love to just have one in my house.
VAT 69.
It's a green bottle. It's black label, and it looks like a stencil. It's VAT 69. That's the VAT number that it used to come out from. And so that was like the gold standard for any immigrants coming from India to the UK or to the US or Canada or whatever, like having VAT 69, because that's what so-and-so, that's what, Shatrughan Sinha or Amitabh Bachchan or Rishi Kapoor, like the Kapoors would drink that on screen. And so that's when it's like, oh, well, if you can afford that. And then people realized it was garbage, and it was just a really pretty bottle on screen. Like, that's what it was.
So in our side of the thing, it was if the person was wealthy.
Yeah.
Or well off, let's say.
Yeah.
They would almost always have like a bar in their house.
Yeah, same.
And just like showing off all their alcohol.
Yeah.
It was like an 80s and 90s thing, I swear.
Yeah, we had it.
I'm sure. Had the glass in the back and the hanging
we
cups.
We had the full on like standing bar with the.
So you had a whole wet bar setup.
Bar setup, and it was like a marble countertop, and then it was red and black leather. And it was like hand cut wood, like this thing. Like I think they got rid of it like when I was in college, but it took like 4 people to get it out of the house.
Oh wow!
Like I don't even remember. It just showed up one day and it was so heavy nobody moved it.
It just stayed there.
That's where the bar was.
Nice.
Like had they left it by the front door, the bar would have been the front door. Like that's what they didn't. They just put it. They finally got it to the back, but it was full on. And then they found at a estate sale. They found these glass cabinets that would literally, in your place, would go from that all the way to your door. Wow. It was one piece.
That's long. That's long.
And nobody, like, they tried to sell it so many times to when they went, like, my mom was like, we need to, kind of minimalize everything in the house, and everybody's getting older. And they tried to sell that one piece, and I was like, just throw it away, because there's nobody that wants one giant cabinet.
Almost never.
But it had the coolest thing ever. It had this little front that would pull, it had a lock on it. And then it would pull down, and then it was just levels of like stadium seating, but for bottles, right? And then it had the glass, like the countertop that unfolded, and you can just mix the drinks there. And it had glass on it as well, so you could just wipe it all off, and there was no mess.
Very cool.
And that was the bar, like that was the gold standard. I was like, that's the bar. And then as we got older, you could see people building bars, and then I don't know when houses started getting media rooms. There was always one in the corner.
See, that's a very Texas-centric thing.
Okay, gotcha.
Small homes in L.A.
Oh, yeah, I know. I lived in L.A.
Very few celebrity homes have, like, the movie theaters and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Most of us live in small houses.
Yeah.
Or apartments.
In Glendale, I understand. Yeah.
If you were like well off back in the day, you had the bar in your house, and then you always had like a bottle of Louis XIII on display.
Oh wow, that's money.
You never opened the damn thing.
Okay,
you just had it on display.
Yeah,
and it'd always be like, when my daughter get married.
Hilarious.
One of those things where like a father would pronounce that it is reserved for a specific day,
occasion. Okay, gotcha.
And he would open it on that day, but like it would sit in that cabinet for 20 years or something until the day came.
They'd be like, he's got no daughter, so like when she gets married, who's he talking about? Yeah. But yeah, we had my dad would get Royal Salute, which is there's Chivas.
Which is like a Kentucky bourbon, I guess?
No, Chivas Regal, which is Scotch.
No. I mean the Salute one.
Royal Salute is so Chivas is 12 years aged.
Okay.
Royal Salute, I think, is 25.
Got it.
And it's in a clay, it's a clay porcelain. I don't remember which one it is. But it's got a bottle that it comes in, like it's handmade and all this stuff. And
that's crazy.
Yeah, back then it was like a couple of $100, maybe $300-$400 a bottle, maybe $200 a bottle, something like that.
Interesting.
And so when that came out, I'm like, oh, this is something big.
So I know nothing about alcohol. It's just not my deal.
Yeah.
But my brother-in-law, who's right in your age bracket, he loves alcohol, like collecting it.
Yeah.
So in his house, he's got just like rare whiskeys that are sealed, not open.
Yeah, I have friends that do that too.
Cognacs and vodkas from around the world, and
he
displays it, but like it's a passion for him. You can tell he really is into like these rare whiskeys and casks.
Yeah,
and all this other stuff.
I just like to drink them. I never was a collector.
I've never been a drinker, so I've never gotten into the collecting portion of it. Like, if I'm not going to enjoy a regular, glass of whiskey or wine, then why should I?
Yeah, I've never like bourbons and whiskeys. Like I understand now that I've gotten older, and it's not just a college thing or, your basic Crown and Coke and vodka and whatever, vodka tonic and all that stuff.
Right.
But there's certain whiskeys I do enjoy. There's some that I know the difference between that whiskey and that bourbon and what cask it's in and what that, and so on and so forth. But I mean, I was in India, and this guy, like, after a show, was like, it was hilarious. They're very sweet. It's a very hospitality driven culture, and but sometimes just the phrasing is a little off.
Okay.
So I got done with the show, and he's like, "It was so good. I would like for you to come with me home." And I'm like, buddy, not that kind of show.
Yeah, right.
Like, no, I have to show you something there. I'm like, again, buddy, not that kind of show. And this guy was a bigwig. He had owned a car dealership in town, and the promoter of the show is like, a couple of us are going over. He always invites us. I think he just had a miscommunication with you. I was like, all right, as long as you guys are going, I'm going. And we get to his house, and it's very nice. I had a whole spread, and like he was prepared for us to get there. And he's like, Mr. Sharma. I was like, yeah. He goes, I want you to see something in my bedroom. And I was like, God, man, you are not. How do you sell a car? Like, I don't know how you're doing this, buddy. And I was kind of just stood in the hallway, and he's like, oh, come inside. I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm good right here. And he had
Poor guy.
Yeah, he had this cupboard, and it was the most gangster shit I've ever seen. It's like that. Right, but if that was motorized, like he flipped this switch and the doors opened this way, and I was
So it's like a sliding door.
yeah, cool. And it just the whole thing lit up purple neon, and it was his bar, and he's like, I have everything, and I'm like, that's awesome. I don't know why you're showing this to me because you've not offered anybody a drink. Like what he was like, the whole thing was like, you're from the U.S. Look what I have.
So that was just his crown jewel.
Yeah, and so tell you're saying is your brother-in-law that you said who?
Yeah, my brother-in-law.
I don't know if he probably knows, but I didn't know Roberto Cavalli made a vodka.
I've had that vodka.
Have you with him? Yeah, it's $500. It's like $500 a bottle.
So Texas is very different. In LA, we have plethora of liquor stores. There's
same. Yeah.
There's no like restrictions and stuff.
No, I mean the one that was so I used to live in Sherman Oaks. I lived there for 11 years.
Yeah.
And so
he lives in West Hills, so like
a
hop, skip away.
Yeah. So I was on. So there was the liquor store on Ventura and Kester that was right directly behind my house.
Okay, I know which one you're talking about.
And they would get like, I mean, you would come in like. Also, there was a Russian grocery store that was down in Encino Commons. There's like this Russian market that had like the machine gun, like the bottle that looked like a machine gun.
There's a bunch of those places. Yeah.
So, but like these guys back there would get the high end. I never saw Roberto Cavalli. I didn't see that until I was in India. But I saw like these high end whiskeys and these high end.
By the way, the Roberto Cavalli thing, not $500 in the U.S.
It's
a lot less.
Okay, because I know he was like, it's $500 a bottle. I was like, man, and he had a line of them, and I was like, wow, that is. But I didn't even know. I know I wear his clothes.
It's not cheap, but it's not like 500. No.
Yeah, I was like, and he's like, have you ever had Cavalli? And I was like, is like Roberto Cavalli, like the fashion designer.
Like what most people don't understand is just a licensing deal for his name.
Of course, right?
He has no idea what the vodka is. He probably doesn't even drink the damn vodka.
Yeah, I just was like, I have some shoes and I have a couple of shirts and some pants. I've never had his vodka.
Yeah, you don't see him advertising. Like Casamigos was a big deal for George Clooney because he was the face of it and he was a drinker of the.
Well, it's him and his buddies. That's the nickname for their house. Was the House of Friends.
Yeah.
That's where the name
But I mean,
comes
the
from.
tequila and everything, they sourced it from this little place in Mexico because they were visiting and all this stuff. And he was really into it. The same way with the
Terramana.
Terramana, I was about to say. Yeah.
Have you had it? I haven't had it yet.
I have not. I have had Casamigos because Casamigos became a regular standard tequila for a long time.
Okay.
Because it's good. It's still good.
Okay. I haven't. I want to try the Terramana thing. I haven't.
I haven't tried the Terramana either. Yeah. But to that point, like exotic vodkas and things like that, they're just everywhere in LA. So he would always he would have.
But that goes again. It goes back to, and I like to see how it's evolved, but still comes from the same place of it is hospitality.
Yeah.
Like so now the standard is different. So back when it was Vought 69, it went to Johnny Walker Black. And now it is your Louis Treys, and it is like I'm not a big cognac brandy guy, but like we had the VSOP, and then we had the XO, the XO, and we had those things, and so like, but it is a hospitality based culture, but it also I think once you leave the country, it goes to see what I've done here,
right?
Look what I can afford now,
yeah.
And so there's a lot of that's kind of underlying. right? So and people ask me, this is what I get a lot. I don't know if you get this. They go, when I think of Indian people, I don't think of comedy. And I'm like, you got to come to a party. It's the funniest thing. Like, there's so much humor and joy and stuff that comes with our culture.
So if you think about it, how much exposure do we as Americans get to the inner workings of Indian culture? Almost none.
That's true. Same with Armenian. Like I didn't know.
Kardashians is not Armenian culture whatsoever.
And neither is Cher.
No,
right.
Even though they have,
but people don't realize Cher is Armenian.
Yeah, even though they have like the DNA and they come from that region of the world somewhere in their family tree.
Yeah,
it's not what the typical Armenian family looks like.
No.
So
no.
I think, but what we do know as an American society about the Indian population easily is very smart people.
Yeah,
hardworking.
Yeah.
Almost always educated.
Yes.
In the IT and healthcare space.
Yes.
Because there's more Patels as doctors than there are Smiths, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, Patels as doctors, yes. And there's also, I mean, when it comes to businesses as well, I mean, Patels have the lock on hotel motels.
Yeah.
Like, that's a fact.
7-Elevens. You always think about the Indian community in 7-Elevens.
And then, like, Biden got in trouble many years ago when they asked him about the Indian culture, and everybody thought he had made a really crass statement. And he goes, "Yeah, I love Indian people. I love the accent. You can't go into a Dunkin' Donuts on the East Coast and not hear it. It's because it's all owned by Indians."
It's very true. Yeah, I've been to all over the East Coast.
All over the East Coast.
So you guys pretty much own it all.
So there's one specific. There's a guy who came in. I don't know his name. I need to do my research better on that. But he came from India, and he worked at a Dunkin' Donuts, and then ended up buying that one.
Nice.
And then he bought another one, and another one, and another one, and he started a program where if you're coming from India and you work at his Dunkin' Donuts, because he has so many of them, he's like, well, now it's time for me to pay it forward. So what you can do is you can work, and he puts you on a program where you can buy the one you're working in from him.
No shit.
Yeah. So that's a program that he has all up and down the East Coast. So all up and down the East Coast, he's doing that. So when Biden said you can't walk into a Dunkin' Donuts, people were like, can you believe the shit he said? He's like,
but he was kind of right.
He was 100% right. He just didn't know that not everybody knew that.
Yeah.
Right. So when they took that blurb out, and they went, oh, look at this. Look at what he said about Indian people. I'm like, calm down. Go see who's there. That's what he meant, is that guy owns them, and then he sells them directly to Indian people. Yeah. So it's like when you go, you can't walk into a Dunkin' Donuts without, so the Dunkin' Donuts. And then I know in the South, Schlotsky's got big with being Indian owned. There's a lot of Schlotsky's in like Atlanta.
I've never heard of a Schlotsky's.
The sandwich place here?
Yeah, I've never been to it.
Oh, it's fantastic, dude. They got the French bread and black olives. Oh, it's incredible.
Okay.
It's a great, great sandwich.
Gotta try it out.
If you're ever in San Marcos, Texas, there's a place called Alvin Ord's. And that's kind of where the Schlotsky sandwich came from. It's a much better sandwich, but it's a mom and pop joint for college kids.
See, that's when a traveling comedian gives you like these little.
I went to school there. I went to school there, so I can tell you about Alvin Ord's. The thing about traveling as a comic, like, we don't really get to see any of a city unless somebody takes us.
Okay.
Right now that I headline for like when you're doing like in the beginning when you're doing one nighters, you're just in that town for one night, and then luckily back in the day, luckily if they gave you a hotel or a motel, like you were lucky. Otherwise, it was just driving to the next city and sleeping in your car, and so. And
you're dirt poor at this point because you're just like a one-nighter comedian. You're still trying to make it.
And that was my mom's thing. It's like, what are we supposed to tell people? Everybody else, that kid, lawyer, doctor, you're a comedian, and I take money for the hotel. I'm like, no, I'm going to do this on my own. And then you like do that the first couple of times. You're like, hey, so how about that money for that hotel? You know what I mean? But they were so they gave me a thing. They were like 6 months.
Okay.
If you can support it, because I was living in here in Dallas. I was living the Village Country Club off Greenville in Southwestern. And like, if you can pay your rent and bills for 6 months without bothering us, because so every immigrant kid, you work for your family. That's what I did. My parents had medical staffing.
There you go.
They staffed nurses in hospitals. And I went to work for them after college. And that's what I did. And it was just, a monkey could do that job. There was no creativity. There was nothing behind it. And I couldn't stand it. Does the company still exist? No. No. But I mean, they did. Mom and pop medical staffing got bought out by the conglomerates, like your HCA and your Columbias, and so those guys got bought out. And then my mother, in 2012, fell sick with cancer, and so that kind of like kind of put everything on hold for that, and then she 2011 passed away, 2012.
My condolences.
Oh, thank you, man. And so that kind of got, I think there was an offer. I don't know if they ever sold it. I know that they were offered money for it. But no, that's not there anymore. But I mean, that's what I did. But then my nights would be like my Friday. I was dating this girl, and Friday nights we got food from the same Chinese place, and we got whoever's special had just come out, and that's what I would do. And so then I got into stand up and got some, early on just local success, like open mics and cable access stuff. And then it's like, hey man, I got this one nighter in Midland, and then the next one you're gonna do is in Wichita Falls, and you're like, oh, okay, so that makes no sense. And it's all these miles, and I remember it was the first time it was if you can pay your bills for 6 months, and I mean I was on dollar menus by the end, but I never said anything. And my mom was also like, she was aware, so she would come like, come home, and my dad like, don't give him any food, you give him nothing, all that stuff. And my mom was like, come home for lunch, and I'm like, Sunday, and I have lunch with my mom, and then she'd pack. I still remember this, like she would pack a bag with like food in it, like Tupperware container, typical Indian, typical ethnic mom.
Oh yeah.
And like I would get it home, and I would take everything out of the bag, and there'd be like two $20 bills. You know what I mean?
Or my grandma would do that so much.
Or like $60, or what? Like I remember one time I think it was $120, and it was like, oh, I don't know how she knew it, but that was like, I was going to go do this show over here, and there was no hotel attached to it, but it was a 4-show run, but it was all in your car. And this was all so, and then I did that, and then it was then there was a lean point where all these Indian, because Russell had just popped, Russell Peters, who lives in Robert Kardashian's house, by the way.
Does he really?
In Hidden Hills. The Robert Kardashian used to own it.
I love Russell Peters. I think he was the first big introduction to Indian comedy.
Yes, he was. And that's the thing. A good friend of mine till this day, and I have his book. It's called Call Me Russell, and at the end of it, he said, it's so brilliant. He goes, I want to thank my family, my friends, and the internet for making me famous. Because the internet popped him off, and he knew it. Like, he was in Canada and he started stand-up in 89.
I mean, we were watching Russell Peters on YouTube on a computer because mobile phones were not exactly like in, the Apple One hasn't been announced yet.
I remember getting that email and thinking to myself, you assholes, I've been doing stand-up here in Dallas, and you're sending me this clip.
Yep.
And I'm trying my hardest to fill the improv. And I'm like, well, and then I got to be friends with Russell, and I'm like, okay, that guy's been doing it since 89. I started in 2002. Like, he put the work in.
Oh, yeah.
And so what happened was there was a kid who lived in Toronto who moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. And he took Russell's, this is before YouTube had time restrictions, he took Russell's 1-hour Comedy Central special and just threw it up on YouTube.
Okay.
And it was, I think, the first thing to legitimately go viral. And so,
I don't see why not, because I remember it was such a bad, grainy video too.
Yeah.
All of us watched it because
everybody watched it.
His accents and the way he portrayed family and his dad. Like, you're like, dude, that's everybody's dad.
Yeah, and so every comic or every Indian kid that didn't want to be a doctor decided, well, he's making money. How hard can it be? Oh. And so they tried. There was this couple of years where the market kind of flooded.
Okay.
And so there were lean times, and I remember my dad was like, "How much longer do you think you can keep this up?" And I was like, "No, I got a couple of shows coming." He's like, "No, but how long do you think you can keep this up?" And he goes, "I'm going to give you a year. In a year, you have a year from today." And he made me sign a contract. That was my dad. That if in a year I didn't have anything of substance, that was like career substance, that I would go to law school.
Okay. Now, you already have a bachelor's, I'm guessing, at this point?
Yeah.
What'd you do your undergrad
in fine arts.
Okay.
So I was an acting major.
Okay. So law school's the only place left.
That's it. My mom still wanted me to be a doctor until the day she died. She's like, there's a program in Switzerland. It's only 2 years. I'm like, I'm not trying to be a 40-year-old doctor.
Even after the success and
I mean,
getting on your own.
I could see, like, when I would come to my parents' house, like, I knew they were having dinner parties when all my shit was on the coffee table. Like, all the magazines, whatever my specials playing on the TV, on the menus on loop, but all of it's on the table like that. I knew then. I was like, no, they're having people over. So when they go, how's Raj doing? You can see.
And
like that.
And now in this moment, you also understand how proud they are of you.
Yeah, of course.
Because
of course.
Look at this, my
yeah,
son.
Yeah. My mom, one of the last shows she came to see, she'd brought 16 of her girlfriends.
How awesome is that?
Yeah. She ended the show. Like I was doing a joke about how, we got beat by my in Indian house. Like the mom is the disciplinarian, and so I was doing a joke about how my mom used to beat me. And I go, if you don't believe me, she's sitting right there, and all 5'3" of her stands, and she was sold out the Improv. And she just waves to everybody. Oh. And she goes, I used to beat him. And the applause break that she got, I was like, the show ends here. Like, there's nothing I can say that's going to be any funnier. And I went, you guys have been fantastic. Thank you.
It's got to be one of the best memories for both of you.
It was one of the coolest moments. Yeah. So the law school thing. And so we're coming down to the wire. And I get a call. And it's this thing called the Guruza Comedy. And it was 16 cities. But they only needed me for the 4. This is what I was told. They only needed me for the 4 stops in Texas.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, this is a national tour. They only need me for 4 of the shows, but I'm getting the press. My dad can see that. And we're like down to the wire. Like we're getting like 2 months away, right? We're going back and forth. We're talking money. And we finally agree to it. And I signed. I haven't told anybody. I signed the contract. They signed the contract. And I look at the availability, and they call, and they go, so here are the dates. And they start saying all 16. And I was like, wow. No, I go, I thought you only wanted me for the 4. They go, oh, you can't do the other 12? I was like, no. I sure can. And they're like, oh, yeah, we want you for all 16 dates.
Nice.
And I signed that contract. They signed that one. We got the dates locked in, the money locked in. And I had an office on Hillcrest and 635 here in Dallas, Hillcrest Plaza. And I walked in, my dad was typing away on the computer or whatever, and I just put the contract on top of his keyboard. And he doesn't even look at me. He just reads, I just watch him take his glasses off. And he reads it, and he puts it in his inbox. And he just goes back to typing. He doesn't even look at me. He goes, oh, that was close.
Nice.
And I was like, oh, all right. And he never bugged me again. Never, ever bugged me again. And so we went on to that. And then the market kind of, devolved when people were like, med school's easier.
Oh yeah,
med school's easier than trying to be a comic because they didn't realize they just saw Russell and going, oh, that happened yesterday. They don't realize he'd been grinding since '89.
Yeah, they don't get it. Like you could put 10 years into it and get nothing out of it.
100%. Or you can put 30 years. And I mean, like Rodney Dangerfield, like he didn't find success until he was 57. He started at 21.
Yeah, and
then he stopped because it was so bad. It was so tough, and he was married with kids that he was installing cabinets. Like that's what he did in New York. He installed cabinets and did siding.
So, yeah, that's the thing is like people don't understand how hard it is
to
be a talented person and then just work nonstop, but see nobody recognize it for decades on end.
Yeah, and then it's also like you don't, there's they also think like when you go to a club and it's sold out, like in the beginning at least, that all that money's coming to you. Like they don't understand, like that club is getting that money. Like whatever that club, early on now I get a percentage of the door, and I keep all of my merchandising and I keep all of my sales and like that. But in the beginning they're like, hey, it's $500. Okay, how much are tickets? $20. What does it hold? $300. And you sell it out. You made $500. The club made $6,000.
Yeah, because they sold alcohol and food
and the food.
All
so
this other stuff.
They're doing Indians at the Improv. Paul Varghese and I, when we first started it, sold out. We had no idea of a door deal. And we're getting, I think, $500 to split between the two of us. Maybe $400. It was like $150 and $250 is what we were making. And I remember we went down to Houston, and we sold out 464 seats. We weren't allowed any comps. It was $15 a head. And I was like, we got put up at the Derrick Hotel in Houston. We both had our own rooms, like gift baskets. I was like, holy shit, man, this is show business. I got a check for $250. I think Paul got $350.
Nice.
And I'm like, And then we didn't realize like they kept all that money, and we thought about the alcohol and the food. They made $20,000 that night. We didn't. And we did that for years and years and years. And then when when we figured out door deals, we went to them. We're like, okay, we want 60% of the door, 70% of the door, whatever it was.
Right.
And then the Derrick stopped, and then it was one room that we split at the Hampton Inn. There were no more flights to the club. We had to drive.
But you were making a lot of money at that point.
But just the immediacy of we figured out the door deal stuff.
Yeah.
And the next time we did it, we're like, okay, but we want this. Cool. Well, here's what Here's what you get for this now. Now we're driving down to Houston. There's no Derrick Hotel. There's no gift bags. There's no.
Yeah, it's the catch-22.
Yeah. And so I just remember seeing the first time we're just sitting in this Hampton Inn, and it's 2 double beds and like a shitty TV, and I'm like, man, what happened to the Derrick? Well, we're getting, but when we got our check that night, I was like, oh yeah,
that makes more sense. Well, because as a club owner, I no longer look at you as an artist that I've booked. I look at you as a partner. So now I don't have to deal with you. It's on you. Yeah, it's on you to make the money happen as much as it's on me now.
Yeah. And so that's what. But early on, and I think people don't understand that because it's called show business, and people like the show, they don't understand the business.
Yeah.
That you see us up there and like, man, this place is packed. Look at this guy, man. He must be making so. No, I mean that's not always the case.
Very true.
So yeah, man.
I'm gonna take a quick second. I gotta.